After spending a couple of weeks traveling all over northern Pakistan and enjoying the calmness, the serenity, and the exceptional beauty that is Gilgit-Baltistan, now it is time to change all that for the craziness and absolute chaos of Lahore. Lahore is typically known as Pakistan's cultural capital, and it is full of history, architecture, literature, art, and it is simply fascinating and so interesting. And it is also chaotic, which it really couldn't be any other way. Lahore has more than 13 million inhabitants, which is crazy to me. It is the second biggest city in Pakistan after Karachi by population, and it is the 26th most populated city in the world, which is wild. So in this video, I'm going to show you around some of the historical sites in Lahore. I'm going to tell you all about my first impressions of Lahore as a European, as a foreign tourist, and all of the culture shock I had. And if you're new here, if you're new to this channel, hi, my name is Laura. I've been traveling all over the world for the past few years, and in this channel I share lots of travel vlogs, hidden gems, and travel information videos. So if you like this kind of content, make sure you subscribe, and let's get back into the video. Tonight I'm going to be doing a food tour in Lahore, so I'm going to be trying some delicious Pakistani cuisine, and everything that I've had so far in Pakistan has been so good, so I'm so excited for tonight. But as you can probably tell by the absence of buildings around me, I'm not currently in Lahore. So I'm currently in Skardu in northern Pakistan. I've spent the past few days here and it has been amazing. I love this place so much. I've enjoyed it so much. But now I have to go to Lahore and I've got a flight to catch, so let's go. So we went to Skardu International Airport, which has daily flights to and from Islamabad, and occasionally there are flights to Lahore as well. So we flew with Pakistan International Airlines, PIA. It was my first time traveling with them and I had a great experience. I'd read lots of bad things about Pakistan International Airlines, but honestly, I felt great traveling with them and I would 100% fly with them again in the future. It is one of the few airlines which gives you free food and it's actually good, like this tasted good, even though it doesn't look great. And the views from this flight were insane. So firstly, seeing the Indus River and Skardu Valley from above is just amazing as it is, but seeing glaciers from an airplane is just extremely beautiful and spectacular to say the least. If you've been following along, you know that I have a slight obsession with glaciers. I absolutely love them. I think they're fascinating. So this was my first time seeing them from an airplane, and unfortunately it was a bit cloudy, so I couldn't see as much of them as I would have liked, but I'm not complaining. I got to see so many and it was so cool still. The first thing that I noticed once I got to Lahore was the heat. Oh my god, the heat was insane. It was so hot and so humid. And by the way, this was back in late August, early September. I know it's October, November now when I'm posting this, but this was a few months back. And it was ridiculously hot. Like you cannot even begin to imagine how hot it was. The second thing I noticed about Lahore was the insane traffic. It was absolute insanity and chaos. And at this point, I had been traveling around Pakistan for 2 weeks. So I'd been to Islamabad, all over Gilgit-Baltistan, parts of KPK. So I thought that I'd seen it all when it came to the traffic, like the insane driving, like truly insane driving, the motorcycles, the crazy motorcycles, and the roads. Like I thought I'd seen it all. Like I was literally in the second most dangerous road in the world going up to Ferry Meadows in Gilgit-Baltistan. So I thought I had seen it all, but apparently not. The insanity of the traffic in Lahore is just unlike anything else that I have ever seen in my life. And I've traveled a lot. I've traveled to really chaotic cities like Nairobi and Arusha, and Lahore is just another level. It is just crazy to me. And these videos, by the way, do not do it justice. Like they are not good representations of the true chaos that is Lahore and driving in Lahore. It was absolutely insane. Like people just walking to cross the highway or people going in the wrong direction. The tuk-tuks were insane as well. It was just crazy. I have no words to describe it. And the last thing that I immediately noticed about Lahore, like as soon as I landed, was how insanely different it was from all of the other places that I had been to in the country before. So going from Skardu to Lahore felt like going to a completely different country. Like they are completely different places, even though they are both in Pakistan and only an hour and a half flight away from each other. Like they're really not that far by distance even, but they are completely different. In my opinion, when we think of countries, we tend to think of them in a very simplistic way and as if they're homogenous places, when that is really not true at all. Countries are multi-layered and they can be so diverse. I think we often forget that the fact that a piece of land is enclosed within a border doesn't mean that that land is all the same. And we forget that borders at the end of the day are lines that humans imagine. They haven't been there since time immemorial, even though it sometimes feels like that. And I think that is the case for all countries. Like my country, Spain, is also very diverse. But Pakistan specifically, like the diversity is just wild. It is incredibly diverse. There is so much diversity when it comes to language, culture, nature, landscapes. And to me, Skardu and Lahore just felt completely different to each other. I'm sure there's lots of similarities, but to me they felt very different, at least from an outside perspective. So we were supposed to go on a food tour in Lahore, or at least that's what I thought. Turns out we were going to a place called Food Street, so I read the itinerary wrong and I clearly didn't do a lot of research, because if I had researched this, I would have known that there's a place in Lahore called Food Street. But I didn't, so this took me by surprise. But I was totally fine with it. We ended up going to a restaurant called Haveli restaurant, which I did know about. It's a very famous restaurant here in Lahore with views of the Badshahi Mosque, which is one of the landmarks of the city. The views were amazing, and I had Kabuli pulao for dinner, and my travel buddy had mutton karahi, extra spicy mutton karahi actually. We actually didn't end up doing a street food tour. We ended up going to a place called Food Street. So I clearly misinterpreted the itinerary here, but the night was still super cool. In Food Street, there's a restaurant called Haveli restaurant, which I'd heard about before. It's very famous because it has a great view of Badshahi Mosque, and the food was delicious as well. I had kabuli pulao and it was so good, and garlic naan, which I also love. And the views were really great. This is my first time seeing Badshahi Mosque, my first time out in Lahore, and I'm just so fascinated by it all. So it was a great evening. It's definitely a big culture shock. It is completely different from Gilgit-Baltistan. It is completely different from Islamabad. I have never been in a place like this. It is probably the most chaotic city I have ever been to, and the biggest city as well, because I think Lahore has 13 million inhabitants, and I think the biggest city that I'd been to before was New York, which has 8 million. So a huge culture shock. The driving here is insane. It's like absolute insanity and chaos. And it's also so hot and humid, and I'm not super used to that. So there's lots and lots of culture shock, and I'm sure there's going to be more, but I mean, so far I'm loving it. I'm having so much fun, but it's just so different from anything that I've experienced ever in my life. The next day, we went on a walking tour of the walled city of Lahore, which is basically the historical center of the city. So this place right here is called the Delhi Gate because it faces Delhi in India. And interestingly, there's actually a gate in Delhi, an ancient gate, called Lahore Gate because it faces Lahore. And we chose kind of an off day to visit the walled city because I'm not sure exactly what was going on, but there was a procession when I visited. This was early September. And there was a lot of security. There were roadblocks, there were lots of police checkpoints, military checkpoints, some streets were closed off to the public, a lot of the businesses were closed, some of the landmarks, some of the monuments were closed and we couldn't see them either. And the vibes, it was really tense, you could notice the tension in the air. So I didn't really get to see the walled city in all of its splendor. I missed a couple monuments that I wanted to see. I also didn't get to see the markets, which I really wanted to see. I was really excited about that. So that was a bit of a bummer. But again, I'm not really sure what all of this was about. I'm sure if the police was there was good reason for it. And of course, the safety of the inhabitants of Lahore is more important than my experience as a tourist. So I was fine with it. And I chose to look at the bright side. So the Wazir Mosque, which was the place that I was the most excited to see in Lahore, was actually closed because of all of this, which I was really bummed about because I thought I wasn't going to be able to visit, but they actually opened it just for us and a couple other tourists. So I was able to see this architectural masterpiece all by myself. I had it all to myself and it was amazing. So that was the one bright side of having all of this going on for me as a tourist, of course, not sure what the impact is for locals. But the Wazir Mosque, oh my god, this place is amazing. So a little bit about the history of Lahore before I start telling you about this mosque right here. So Lahore has had an incredibly rich history. It has been part of so many empires like the Mughal Empire, the Timurid Empire, the Delhi Sultanate, and so many more all throughout its history. But there are three empires which I think are the most important ones. So first of all is the Mughal Empire, which lasted from the 1500s to the 1700s, and this was truly the height of Lahore as a city in my opinion. This is when the walled city was formed and where many of the mosques that you see today and many of the historical landmarks were built, and it was a great time for Lahore as a city. After the decline of the Mughals, Lahore was part of many empires, but the one that stands out the most in my opinion is the Sikh Empire, which lasted from the 1700s to the 1800s. After the Sikhs, the British East India Company annexed Lahore and it became part of British India and the British Empire, which I don't think this was good for the region. I don't think this was good for Pakistan or for Lahore or the region in general, but it was very important in shaping Lahore and Pakistan today. So going back to Wazir Khan Mosque, which is simply stunning, this is a 17th century Mughal mosque which was commissioned by Emperor Shah Jahan. So Shah Jahan was the 5th Mughal emperor and he is probably the best well known because he was a hugely important patron of the arts and architecture in the Mughal era. He was definitely part of the golden age for Mughal architecture. I'll talk more about him later, but one of the most important buildings that he commissioned was definitely the Wazir Khan Mosque, which is also considered to be the most ornately decorated Mughal era mosque, and it is simply beautiful with the minarets and the courtyard is just stunning. The tile work is so impressive. And before I traveled to Pakistan, I wasn't sure that I was going to be allowed inside mosques. I knew that I was going to be able to see them from the outside, of course, but I didn't know if I was going to be allowed in because in some countries you're not allowed in. For example, I was in Morocco a couple of years ago and you are not allowed in most mosques in Morocco. But in Pakistan, I was able to enter all of the mosques that I visited. So this was not the first one that I went to, but it was definitely the one that I was looking forward to the most. And of course, if you want to enter a mosque, you have to be respectful of the culture and the religion. So if you're a woman, you do have to cover up. You do have to cover your hair with a veil. So I personally recommend that you carry one around when you travel in Pakistan and you have one with you at all times in case you want to enter a mosque or go to another place where you might have to cover up. So that is what I did, and I didn't wear a veil at any other time during my trip to Pakistan, but I did use it to cover my hair inside mosques like this one. You also shouldn't show too much skin, so it's a good idea to wear long sleeve and obviously not show any cleavage or wear shorts or anything like that. There are no laws regulating what you can and cannot wear in Pakistan, so technically you can wear whatever you want, but it is a more conservative country and a more conservative society, so it is a good idea to dress modestly, and inside a mosque or a religious center, it is very disrespectful not to dress modestly, so you might not even allowed in if you're not dressed modestly. And to some extent, this also goes for men. Of course, they don't have to cover their hair and they're not subject to such high standards as women. But for example, one of the tourists that we were with was wearing shorts and he was told that he could not enter the mosque like that. He had to wear long trousers or cover himself some way to enter the mosque. There were also some signs saying that you could not enter the mosque if you were wearing shorts. So that is another specific rule that they have in mosques, at least in this mosque in Pakistan. And even though the Wazir Khan Mosque was by far my favorite mosque and my favorite thing to see in Lahore, it is not actually the most famous mosque in the city. That honor goes to Badshahi Mosque. So Badshahi Mosque is the building that I showed earlier on in the video that we could see from Haveli restaurant at night, and this probably looks familiar. This probably looks a lot like the Taj Mahal to you. If you haven't seen this building before, you'd probably think, oh, it's the Taj Mahal but in red. And that is because both the Taj Mahal and Badshahi Mosque and Wazir Khan Mosque, they're all Mughal era buildings. So back in the day, the Mughal Empire stretched from Pakistan to India. It straddled both countries, so that is why some buildings might look really similar. And Badshahi Mosque is huge. Like, I could not believe how big it was when I entered the courtyard. It is truly enormous, and the photos and the videos do not make it justice. You cannot get a feel of how big this place is until you actually go there. It is the largest mosque of the Mughal era, and it is the third largest mosque in Pakistan to this day. I also think that it is one of the largest mosques in the world, but I'm not completely sure about that. It wouldn't surprise me though, to be honest. It was commissioned by Emperor Aurangzeb. Okay, I don't think I said that right at all. I think I just butchered that, but he was the 6th Mughal emperor. He was Shah Jahan's successor. And Badshahi Mosque today, it's probably the most iconic site in Lahore and one of the most iconic sites in all of Pakistan. And right across from Badshahi Mosque, you can find Lahore Fort. So Lahore Fort is the last big monument or big place that I visited during this walking tour of the walled city. And if I said that Badshahi Mosque was big, you cannot believe how huge Lahore Fort is. Like, it spreads over an area greater than 20 hectares, which is insane. So 20 hectares, just so you get an idea, is 49 acres, and Lahore Fort contains 21 notable monuments inside. Like, those are only the notable ones, and some of which date to the era of Emperor Akbar, who is the 3rd Mughal emperor, and he is the one who commissioned the Lahore Fort and the building of Lahore Fort. It was also almost entirely rebuilt in the 17th century when the Mughal Empire was at the height of its splendor and its opulence, and part of it was rebuilt by Emperor Shah Jahan, which is the part that I found the most interesting. So one of those parts was a place known as Shahi Qila, and again, I hope I said that right. So Shah Jahan, as I said earlier, he was the 5th Mughal emperor. He was a hugely important patron of Mughal architecture. He commissioned Wazir Khan Mosque among many other buildings, and he had many wives. But he was very much in love with his second wife, which was Mumtaz Mahal. And he loved her so much that he built a specific palace for her inside Lahore Fort, which is the Shahi Qila, which is this place right here. So the story goes that one night Mumtaz was dreaming and she dreamt that she was flying above the clouds. And when she woke up, she told her husband, Shah Jahan, that if he truly loved her, he would recreate that feeling for her in real life, not just in dreams. And that is exactly what Shah Jahan did. He commissioned the building of Shahi Qila. He got marble from India, which resembled clouds, and he built the floor of the palace like that. He also built her a waterfall that would carry perfumed water, and it would end in a lagoon that reflected the moonlight perfectly. The lagoon also had a platform that would have dancers, so this was all to Mumtaz's delight. And Mumtaz kept dreaming, and she kept asking her husband to make her dreams come true. So one day Mumtaz told Shah Jahan that she loved watching the stars, she loved stargazing, and if he truly loved her, he would bring down the stars from the sky to her. So Shah Jahan recreated that the best that he could, and he brought these mirrors all the way from Syria to decorate the inside of the palace, so that when you would put a candle close to the mirrors, it would recreate the effect of stars twinkling in the light inside the palace while being indoors. And the effect with the light is absolutely mesmerizing. It is so beautiful. But unfortunately, Mumtaz never got to see this because she passed away while giving birth to her 14th child in 1631, and Shahi Qila was finished in 1632, so she never got to see it completed. Shah Jahan very famously built the Taj Mahal as a mausoleum for her. He commissioned it. It is in Agra in India, and it is probably the thing that Shah Jahan is most famous for. After visiting Lahore Fort, we left the walled city and we went to a place called Shalimar Gardens. So the Shalimar Gardens are also from the Mughal era, and they were commissioned by none other than Shah Jahan. The Shalimar Gardens were built in a similar style to other gardens that were built at the time in Central Asia and Persia, which is modern-day Iran. And the thing that surprised me the most when I got there was how insanely huge the gardens were. Something that I've noticed that is very common or very notable across all of the Mughal architecture that I visited, also in Badshahi Mosque and Lahore Fort, is how big and how extensive these buildings are. It occupies so much space, and it's a very big contrast between the chaos of the streets of Lahore and then being inside the gardens where everything is quiet and very green and very calm and serene, which was really nice and a nice break from Lahore's chaos. And there also weren't that many people when I was there, or maybe there were, but because the gardens are so big, you just couldn't tell. You felt like you were pretty isolated, but in a good way, you know, like it was very calm. And it was also a very nice break from people staring and people constantly asking for photographs. So this was also a big culture shock that I had in Pakistan, but specifically in Lahore, I think it was taken to the next level. Everyone stared at me and everyone tried to take photos with me or of me. So I touched a bit on this on a previous video that I made about my first impressions of Pakistan when I first arrived in Islamabad. But basically, not a lot of foreigners travel to Pakistan. So when one does, people are very curious and they will stare and they will look at you, and they're truly not being malicious when they do that. Like Pakistanis, they don't have bad intentions when they stare at foreigners. It's just that they're very curious. And I also have a feeling that it's not considered very rude to stare at someone in Pakistan. While it is extremely rude in my home country in Spain, you would never stare at someone for such a long time. I think it's just not viewed badly in Pakistan, so that's why people stare. Basically curiosity, and it's not considered rude. But you end up finding yourself in very interesting situations. So for example, when I was in Lahore Fort, as soon as I arrived, there were two boys that started staring at me and my travel buddy. So one of them was maybe 12 or 13 years old and the other one was maybe 8 or 9. So they stared at us for such a long time that in the end I started staring back right into their eyes. So they would kind of get the hint and stop looking at me like I was some weird person or something like that. And while the older boy definitely got the hint and told his brother, like, come on, let's go, the younger boy was like, leave me alone. I want to keep staring. So he kept staring like straight into my eyes as I was staring at him. And it was such an awkward situation for me, at least. And in the end, I had to look away. And he just kept staring and kept staring. And as we moved on with the tour, the two boys kind of followed. And I mean, they were little boys, so like they were just curious, and at one point like I stared back at them again and the little boy said hello and like was just super curious, but the guy did end up having to tell them to just leave and leave us alone. So the boys were clearly not being malicious, they were just curious. But if I'm honest, even though I think of it as a very funny story now, at the time I was a bit uncomfortable. And something similar happened when it came to photographs. So lots of people wanted to take photographs with us, to take selfies with us. And in other parts of Pakistan, I accepted, I don't have a problem with that. But in Lahore, because there were so many people, I declined most of them. Also, our tour guide said that if we agreed to take a photo with someone, then a bunch of people would come and expect the same thing. So we would end up being very overwhelmed. So we said no to every person that came to us wanting a photo. And I will say, when we said no, most people accepted that. They were completely fine with that and they didn't insist, which I really, really appreciated. But it was a very big culture shock for me. I'm not used to that at all. I did find it a little bit uncomfortable, even though, again, there was no bad intentions behind any of that. And I was a bit annoyed, though, when people took photos of me without my permission. Like, if you want a photo with someone, ask for permission, and if they say no, it means no. So I was a bit... I was very uncomfortable when people put their phones on me and I could see them zooming into me and stuff like that. Like, I didn't like that at all. But I guess it's just a culture shock, that's what it is. And the Shalimar Gardens were a bit of a break from that because there weren't so many people around. I feel like I could walk around there without being stared at or without people taking photos of me. And after the Shalimar Gardens, we went to the last stop of the day, which was the Wagah Border. So Lahore is very close to India, and even though Pakistan and India have a lot of history in common, like I said earlier, for example, the Mughal Empire straddled both India and Pakistan, today these two countries do not get along. If you know anything about India and Pakistan and South Asian politics, you know that these two countries simply do not like each other. And the border is very, very contentious. It's one of the things that they disagree the most on. So at the Wagah border, there is a parade every evening, and it has become a little bit of a tourist attraction. So most foreign tourists that visit Lahore will also go to the border parade. And it's also a place that a lot of everyday Pakistanis go to. So because I've read a lot about it and I've seen a lot of it on social media, I wanted to check it out for myself. And simply going to the border was already a big experience because there were so many police and military checkpoints on the way there, which makes sense, but still there were so many. And because the walled city had this police situation in the morning when I'd been there, I had been through so many police checkpoints in just one day. So it was a lot, definitely. And it was in moments like these that I'm reminded of just how militaristic Pakistan's culture is. Like, it has a huge military and like militaristic society. And it makes sense, like, this is not criticism whatsoever. It makes sense given its political and like socio-political context, but it is very striking to me as a foreigner, just seeing how much impact the military has in Pakistani culture. Another big shock to me as a tourist was seeing that military checkpoints were different for men and women. Like, there's a military checkpoint for women and a military checkpoint for men, and like they're separate, and in airports as well. This was also something that really surprised me when I was in Pakistan, and that again makes sense, but I didn't expect. But once we got into the parade, we could see the flag of India, but not the Pakistani flag. So the Indian flag is right there, and the Pakistani flag is supposed to be on this white pole right here, but for some reason it's not up today, and we don't know why, but that's very interesting. I figured out why there's no Pakistani flag. So apparently there's construction, so that's why it's not up. But I thought it was strange because this is the flag lowering ceremony, but it will go down on the Indian side. So there was construction on the border the day that I was there. So again, I didn't get to see it in like its full splendor, but I'm sure that when it's finished, it's gonna look amazing. But anyway, so we were looking onto the Indian side of the border. We were looking into India, and both spaces, like both the Pakistani side and the Indian side, were packed full. And the parade started with kind of a competition of who could play their music the loudest. The music was so loud, and it was very good music. It was Pakistani music, national music, very inspiring. I could hear a lot of Pakistan Zindabad, which I think means long live Pakistan. Correct me if I'm wrong though, I'm not entirely sure about that. So yeah, lots of nationalistic vibes, lots of nationalistic music. A lot of the people who were at the border had like these little Pakistani flags or had their face painted with a Pakistani flag as well. Like lots of Pakistani national motifs and sayings basically. And then the military comes out and the soldiers come out. So the Pakistanis have this really gorgeous black and red uniform. I really liked the Pakistani uniforms, like that they were wearing. And on the Indian side, they have a red and khaki uniform, which is also really nice. And they kind of coordinate this dance. And it's like, I'm not exactly sure how to explain it. You can see it on the video right here. But they kick their legs super high up, which is really impressive. And they coordinate each other, like with the Indian and Pakistani sides. They have this coordinated dance that ends up with them lowering the flag on both sides. And this lasts for about an hour. And it was so much fun and genuinely so inspiring. So I know this is going to sound crazy, but while being at the Wagah border and after, it kind of made you want to become Pakistani. It kind of made you love Pakistan in a very deep way, which sounds very strange, especially considering that I'm a foreigner and I spent a total of 12 days in Pakistan, I think. But it really did. It was super inspiring and so much fun. But here's the thing, and I'm going to be very honest and possibly controversial, but I just feel like I have to say this for the sake of honesty. I didn't like the message behind the parade. So supposedly, the parade is done to celebrate peace between both India and Pakistan, and I can kind of see that in some ways, but at the same time, I don't. Because the thing is, even though the official message of the parade is meant to be one of peace, I definitely don't think that is the case. I definitely think on both the Pakistani and the Indian side, this is nationalist propaganda. And nationalism, I didn't realize how inspiring and fun it could be. It definitely is. But it is nationalism at the end of the day, in my humble opinion. Something that I found very interesting is that there were a couple of people in the parade I'm not exactly sure how to describe it, but they were dressed in white, they had the Pakistani flag, and they were kind of like animating the crowd to be louder and kind of putting them against the Indian side, if that makes any sense. I'm sure I have video of them and I'll put it in here so you can see what I mean. But my point is that this definitely didn't feel like a peaceful parade at all. And if the intention of the parade truly is to promote peace between both countries, it is definitely not achieving that. So I'm not going to talk about the disagreements between India and Pakistan. It is not my place. I'm not Indian, I'm not Pakistani, and I'm also not a politician or a political analyst. So I'm going to stay well clear from that. It is not my place to talk about it. But when it comes to the Wagah border, that was my sincere impression. I'm not trying to be purposefully controversial or provocative here, so feel free to discuss about what I said in the comments, but please do so kindly. But yeah, I definitely felt like I needed to be honest from my point of view as a foreign tourist and as a visitor of the Wagah Border, exclusively as a visitor of the Wagah Border and nothing else. After the parade ended, we went back to Lahore, we went back to our hotel, and this was our last night in Pakistan, which was so sad because I genuinely loved traveling in the country. It is a country that had been on my bucket list for years, and I was so excited to finally be able to travel here. It was a dream come true. So this is going to be the last vlog of my Pakistan series, but don't worry because there's still Pakistan content coming out. I have a few videos planned about some of the culture shocks that I had, about why I traveled to Pakistan in the first place, answering some common questions about traveling to Pakistan if you want to go there yourself. Like safety, for example, is a big question that a lot of foreign tourists have before they travel to the country. So I will be posting all of that in the coming weeks, and I also have a few videos from Tanzania. So before I started posting my vlogs from Pakistan, if you've been following for a while, you might have noticed I posted a bunch of vlogs from Tanzania, which I absolutely love. Tanzania is also one of my favorite countries to travel to. And I also have a bunch of informational videos about Tanzania, about cultural activities in Tanzania, cultural shocks, safari, everything that you need to know to travel to the country, which I will also be posting. And I will kind of be posting these videos about Pakistan and Tanzania at the same time. Like I will post maybe a few about like informational videos about Pakistan and then a few informational videos about Tanzania, and kind of like that for the next few weeks. And there may be a few surprise vlogs in the meantime if I do any more traveling, which I might or I might not. So make sure you subscribe if you want more of that. And if you like this video, make sure you like, leave a comment, and subscribe. It would really help me a lot. And thank you so much for watching until the end.